Remember that reparation on earth does not end on earth. It continues also in heaven. When we die and we go to heaven, we continue to offer God reparation from heaven for the sins of mankind on earth. I think it's Revelation chapter 6, where there's a vision of the souls in heaven pleading vengeance before God for the blood shed of the righteous. How long, O God, I think it's recorded in chapter 6 of the book of Revelation, will you wait before the blood of the just shed will be vindicated? Okay? Now that's a cry for reparation.
Bless the Lord, O my soul, blessed art thou, Lord.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Armor of God again. And as always, I'd like to start the video with a huge thank you to all of you for taking a little bit of your time to be here with us. So hopefully you'll be learning a lot from this one as well. Now I'm sure some of you have heard or someone says to you that they don't like watching Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ because they couldn't see our Lord Jesus being tortured, humiliated in the movie. And as we're approaching Easter, I thought this is a good subject to cover, and I hope that by sharing the following clip with you, you'll appreciate more why it's very important for us to meditate upon the passion of our Lord. Please listen to this.
Addressing a concern that has been shared to me on few occasions by some Christians, and this concern is as follows. Father, I don't like meditating on Jesus' passion. It makes me depressed. When I think about what the Lord suffered, his brutal agony, his abandonment, his ridicule, the scoffings and buffetings he experienced, the flagellation, how can I not be depressed? Now, how would you answer that question? Well, this is how I answer these concerns expressed to me. When consider you a parent of a child, which most of you are out there. Consider your child in a terrible accident. What mother would turn her back on her son's injuries and interior plight and just detach herself from the personal sorrow this causes her to relieve her own sorrow? What mother would do that? No, rather the mother would empathize with her child, even if it caused her pain. On the contrary, she would wish the son's or daughter's pains were her own. And in this empathy, she consoles the child in such a way that the child is distracted from his or her own pain to concern him or herself with the mother's love. Well, this is exactly what happens when we meditate upon Jesus' sorrows. We are literally consoling him. We are relieving the duress, the interior and exterior sorrows and pains he's enduring, and the abandonment he feels because people don't want to concern themselves with his pains or sorrows, you see? So he is like a beggar reaching out to us from heaven as if it were asking us, help me, please. We fail oftentimes to realize that God needs our help. Think of that. God has everything, right? He doesn't need anything. On the one hand, in heaven he doesn't. But in relation to mankind and its sinfulness on earth and the effects, the negative effects it is producing throughout creation which was made in and view of man, God cannot help creation without man. And in that sense, God suffers vicariously. And in that sense, he needs our help. He made us the king and queen, the little god, so to speak, of the universe, in particular of this earth. And the more man fails to do the will of God and sins, the more creation suffers its consequences. And God cannot help us or creation without us. And it is in that sense that God needs our help and cannot help us without us. God cannot save us without us. This is a fact, a theological fact. So God therefore asks us to help us help creation by giving him, offering to him love, praise, thanksgiving, and reparation. What does reparation do if not appeal to God by taking upon itself, that is, the soul taking upon itself, the negative effects of sin for others, for the good of others, interceding on behalf of others who, due to no merit of their own, may be saved because of our intercessory prayers. I recall here at Fatima, the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared to 3 shepherd children, a revelation approved by the Church. Mary appeared to Lucia, Jacinta, and Francisco, and opened the earth, and showed them souls who were in hell. And they were shocked by this horrible sight of what Lucia described as humans walking into flames and coming out of the other side transformed as ugly beasts, representing their soul's condition in hell, which cannot be changed, which is eternal. And Mary said to these 3 little shepherd children, many souls are going to hell, many souls are in hell because there are not enough people to pray for them. What does that mean? It means that we, through our prayers of reparation, can avert souls going to hell. We cannot take them out of hell once they're there, no. But by our prayers, we can avoid souls going to hell that without our prayers would end up in hell. This is the purpose of reparation. By doing that, we console the heart of Jesus. We satisfy his longing for souls to be saved, you see. This is the purpose of reparation. Now, what about the souls that are lost? How can we console or make satisfaction for them? We cannot change their state, for once they are in hell for all eternity. And remember, it is their own choosing to be there. God does not send anyone to hell against their will, and their choosing is by their actions in their life on earth. All right. How do we console Jesus for these lost souls? What we do is we offer to God the glory, the honor, the joy, the thanksgiving that they should have given him, but failed to give him. So in other words, we substitute for their acts that never were done, for the acts they failed to do to glorify God, and we can do that.
And then I would also like to share this clip of Father Reehil with you, and I always love it whenever priests talk about the saints.
St. John Vianney, who is the patron saint of all priests, was horribly harassed in supernatural ways by the devil. He would come at night when he would go to bed, and he would drag chains through the house, waking him up and creating noise and slamming doors so that he couldn't get a good night's rest. He constantly was disturbing him, so he couldn't get a good night's rest. So he would wake up tired and have difficulty celebrating Mass, have difficulty hearing confessions, have difficulty doing all the things that he was called to do. So this is a common tactic. And most Catholics, if they're serious about warfare, tend to do so very much by the seat of their pants. Because for many people, this is a scary topic, and they don't want to intentionally get into battles with demons. And I see no fault in that. But you can't shy away from the responsibilities you have as a Catholic. For many people, spiritual warfare is like occasionally confronting a bully on the playground, like in elementary school. You're aware of the event, but are never aware of the long game of warfare. And strategic warfare is a concept that's foreign to most people. So unfortunately, the enemy is quite familiar with strategic warfare, and in fact, that's the only game he plays. And he's been doing it for millennia, so he has lots of practice in working with human beings. What would be the end result of all this? Well, most believers approach warfare like they're playing checkers or dodgeball. Satan is always playing chess, and he's always, 14 steps ahead in his plotting. So we have to be relying on the wisdom of God. God is way ahead of Satan, so we can depend on what he asks us to do to be the right cause of action to take.
And following the recent trend of videos that I've been releasing here with you during this season of Lent, in light of that, I would also like to share this clip of Father Carlos Martins with you as well.
The faith, the grace we get to believe is a free gift from God. Nothing we do merits it. And it's a free gift. The Lord gives it because he is a giver. There's nothing we've done to earn it. He just bestows it. But that faith, that gift, it demands a response from us. That response needs to entail good works. it has to entail that we are given the faith not simply for ourselves, but to disseminate. Of the Protestant doctrine of it is by faith alone that we merit salvation, that by which we are judged by the Lord, and that nothing we can do can be commensurate with that free gift of salvation that the Lord gives, that we can't earn salvation. They are right in that we can't earn it. Nothing we can do will pay the price that Christ has already paid, or that will equal the price and even surpass what he has done. Nevertheless, because we have received such an extraordinary gift, it is right and just that we incarnate that gift, that we pass on the faith through good works, through kindness, through generosity. And this is how, in fact, friends, that the faith really spread. It didn't spread because of the work of the priests and bishops. I mean, they contributed to it as Christians and even through the duties of their office. But it was through people's encounter with Christians and how different they are. And this brings us to something that I've identified and been aware of in different people in the faith. Now, myself being a convert to the faith, I converted when I was 21 years old. I was a college kid at the time, and it completely changed my way of living. It changed my way of being. And the faith then became the center by which I lived my life and the lens through which I saw all of reality. But I looked around and I saw people, and as a priest, you can really see this, that people will use religion selfishly, that they attend their Sunday Mass and check that they donated whatever amount that they donated to the church, even if it was an extraordinarily high amount. But the faith was a thing within their lives. It wasn't their lives. It wasn't that thing by which their life took on meaning. So God was in a box that you open on Sunday, or that you open at whatever discrete times you do. But it isn't something by which you center your life. And so, for example, they are never involved in any kind of promulgation of the faith, even to their neighbors. Right? Somebody can live next to you for 30, 40 years and never know that you are a Christian. There's something wrong with this. There's something wrong with this. And this kind of thing, I can only imagine, will be read out to us on Judgment Day. Right? That you wasted this opportunity that the Lord gave you. Right? How, like someone lived next to you 40 years, you never once invited them to Mass. That you don't know the first thing about their own belief in salvation. You might know if they're a good neighbor or not. They might be able to respond about your qualities as a neighbor. But you've never experienced one another in terms of your religious sentiments, the hope that you have for eternal life. So this kind of thing, and in fact, parish churches, heavens, 8% of the people do 92% of all of the work. And there's a number of folks who consistently receive, a whole lot of folks that consistently receive, but don't contribute, don't participate. And I understand that not everybody can, and especially not in every season of his or her life, because there are periods where, because of what you have going on, it's just, you have no time. Like you have to feed your family. You have a season where it's harvest time and you just don't have any time for anything else. But if those around us don't see our good works, there's something wrong with our faith. There's something wrong with us. There's something wrong with the way we live the faith. And that will come back to us on Judgment Day. All right, so friends, look for an opportunity to share the faith with those around you, and so that those around you experience a hope for salvation. Because I'll tell you this, someone who does not have God, and it doesn't matter who it is, that person is not happy. That person is not satisfied. And even if exteriorly they look so, and even if exteriorly they look like they don't have a care in the world, they have all the wealth they need, they have all the friends they need, they have all the toys they need, and so forth, there is a hollowness inside, and they are acutely aware of that, even if you are not. And so if they encounter in you something that transcends you and I, that gives them pause. And that is the greatest argument for the existence of God. Because something will touch them that will awaken that pain. It may exacerbate that pain, but that's a good thing. Because pain leads us to going to a physician. And the divine physician is the physician of our souls.
So before we get to the end of this video, we'd like to share this one that we shared with you in the past from the vision of Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich. And thank you so much again for taking the time to watch this video, and we hope you have learned a lot from this one.
The building of the Tower of Babel was the work of pride. The builders aimed at constructing something according to their own ideas, and thus resist the guidance of God. When the children of Noah had become very numerous, the proudest and most experienced among them met to resolve upon the execution of some work so great and so strong as to be the wonder of all ages to come, and cause the builders to be spoken of as the most skillful, the most powerful of men. They thought not of God, they sought only their own glory. Had it been otherwise, as I was distinctly told, God would have allowed their undertaking to succeed. The children of Shem took no active part in the work. They dwelt in a level country where palm trees and similar choice fruit grow. They were, however, obliged to contribute something toward the building, for they did not dwell so far distant at that period as they did later. The Tower of Babel was built upon rising ground, about 2 leagues in circumference, around which lay an extensive plain covered with fields, gardens, and trees. To the foundations of the tower, that is up to its first story, 25 very broad stone walks led from all sides of the plain. 25 tribes were engaged in the building, and each tribe had its own road to the tower. Off in the distance, where these roads began, each tribe had its own particular city, that in time of danger or attack they might flee to the tower for shelter. The tower was intended likewise to serve as a temple for their idolatrous worship. The stone roads were, where they took their rise in the plain, tolerably far apart. But around the tower they lay so close that the intervening spaces were not greater than the breadth of a wide street. Before reaching the tower, they were connected by cross arches, and between every 2 there opened a gateway about 10 feet wide into its base. When these gently inclined roads had reached a certain height, they were pierced by single arcades. Near the tower the arcades were double, one above the other, so that through them one could make the circuit of the building even around the lowest part under all the roads. Above the arches that connected the inclined roads were walks or streets, running horizontally around the tower. Those gently rising roads extended like the roots of a tree. They were designed in part as supporting counterpillars to strengthen the foundation of the immense building, and partly as roads for the conveyance from all points of building materials and other loads to the first story of the tower. Between these extended bases were encampments upon substructures of stone. In many places, the tops of the tents rose above the roads that ran through them. From every encampment, steps cut in the walls led up to the walks. One could go all around the tower, through the encampments and arches, and under the stone roads. Besides the occupants of the encampments, there were others who lived in the vaults and spaces on either side of the stone roads. In and around the whole building swarmed innumerable living beings. It was like a huge ant-hill. Countless elephants, asses, and camels toiled up and down the roads with their heavy burdens. Although these burdens were far broader than the animals themselves, yet several could, with ease, pass one another on the roads. On them were halting places for feeding and unloading the animals, also tents on the level spaces and even factories. I saw animals without a guide bearing their burdens up and down. The gateways in the basement of the tower led into a labyrinth of halls, passages, and chambers. From this lower part of the tower, one could mount by steps cut out on all sides. The interior at this point consisted of cellars, immense and secure, covered chambers, and passages. The building was begun on all sides at once. All tended to one central point, where at first stood a large encampment. They used tiles, also immense hewed stones, which they hauled to the site. The surface of the walks was quite white, and it glistened in the sun. At a distance, the sight it presented was wonderful. The tower was planned most skillfully. I was told that it would have been finished and would now be standing as a magnificent monument of human skill had it been erected to the honor of God. But the builders thought not of God. Their work was the offspring of presumption. The names of those that had contributed to the grandeur and magnificence of the building were inscribed with words of praise in the vaults and on the pillars, in the former by means of different colored stones, and on the latter in large characters. There were no kings, but only the heads of the different families, and they ruled according to common counsel. The stones employed in the building were skillfully wrought. They fitted into one another, held one another together. There were no raised figures on the building, but many parts of it were inlaid with colored stones, and here and there were figures hewn in niches. Canals and cisterns were constructed for water supplies. All lent a helping hand. Even the women trod the clay with their feet. The men worked with breast and arms bare, the most distinguished wearing a little cap with a button. Even in very early times, women kept the head covered. The building so increased in bulk and height that on account of the shade it cast, it was quite cold on one side, while on the other the reflection of the sun's rays made it very hot. For 30 years, the work went on. They were at the second story. They had already encircled and walled in the interior with tower-like columns, had already recorded their names and races thereon in colored stones when the confusion broke forth. I saw one sent by God, Melchizedek, going around among the leaders and the masters of the building. He called upon them to account for their conduct, and he announced to them the chastisement of God. And now began the confusion. Many who had up to this time worked on peaceably, now boasted their skill and the great services they had rendered in the undertaking. They formed parties. They laid claim to certain privileges. This occasioned contradictions, animosities, and rebellion. There were at first only 2 tribes among the disaffected, and these, it was resolved, should be put down. But soon it was discovered that disunion existed among all. They struggled among themselves. They slew one another. They could no longer make themselves understood by one another, and so at last they separated and scattered over the whole earth. When in my childhood I had the vision of the building of the tower, I used to reject it because I could not understand it. I had, of course, seen nothing like it, no buildings but our farmhouses and the city of Kusfeld. More than once I thought it must be heaven, but I had the vision again and again, and always in the same way I see it still, and I have also seen how it looked in Job's time. One of the chief leaders in the tower building was Nimrod. He was afterward honored as a deity under the name of Belus. He was the founder of the race that honored Derketo and Semiramis as goddesses. He built Babylon out of the stones of the tower, and Semiramis greatly embellished it. He also laid the foundation of Nineveh and built substructures of stones for tent dwellings. He was a great hunter and tyrant. At that period, savage animals were very numerous, and they committed fearful ravages. The hunting expeditions fitted out against them were as grand as military expeditions. They who slew these wild animals were honored as gods. Nimrod also, that is, where the door serves as an egress for the smoke as well as for the cows, drove men together and subdued them. He practiced idolatry. He was full of cruelty and witchcraft, and he had many descendants. He lived to be about 270 years old. He was of sallow complexion, and from early youth he had led a wild life. He was an instrument of the devil, and very much given to star worship. Of the numerous figures and pictures that he traced in the planets and constellations, and according to which he prophesied concerning the different nations and countries, he sought to reproduce representations which he set up as gods. The Egyptians owe their sphinx to him, as also their many-armed and many-headed idols. For 70 years, Nimrod busied himself with the histories of these idols, with ceremonial details relative to their worship and the sacrifices to be offered them, also with the forming of the pagan priesthood. By his diabolical wisdom and power, he had subjected the races that he led to the building of the tower. When the confusion of tongues arose, many of those tribes broke away from him, and the wildest of them followed Mizraim into Egypt. Nimrod built Babylon, subjected the country around, and laid the foundation of the Babylonian Empire. Among his numerous children were Ninus and Derketo. The last mentioned was honored as a goddess. From Derketo to Semiramis, I saw 3 generations of daughters. Derketo was a tall, powerful woman. I saw her clothed in skins with numerous straps and animals' tails hanging about her. Her head was covered by a cap made of the feathers of birds. I saw her with a great train of followers, male and female, sallying forth from the neighborhood of Babylon. She was constantly in vision or engaged in prophesying, offering sacrifice, founding cities, or roving about. She and her followers drove before them scattered tribes with their herds, prophesied on the subject of good dwelling places, piled up stones, some of which were immense, offered sacrifice, and practiced all kinds of wickedness. She drew all to herself. She was sometimes here, sometimes there. She was everywhere honored. She had in her old age a daughter who played a part similar to her own. I saw this vision in a plain by which was signified the origin of the abomination. Lastly, I saw Derketo as a frightful old woman in a city by the sea. She was again carrying on her sorcery by the seashore. She was in a state of diabolical ecstasy, and she was proclaiming to her people that she must die for them, give her life for them. She told them that she could remain with them no longer, but that she would be transformed into a fish, and as such be always near them. She gave directions for the worship to be paid her, and in presence of the assembled multitude, plunged into the sea. Soon after, a fish arose above the waves, and the people saluted it with sacrifices and abominations of all kinds. Their divinations were full of mysteries, signs, etc., connected with water. Through Derketo's instrumentality, an entire system of idolatry arose. After Derketo, I saw another woman, the daughter of Derketo. This was still in Nimrod's time, for they belonged to the same age. I saw this daughter leading a life even wilder and more violent than her mother's had been. She was engaged most of her time in hunting, attended by crowds of followers. She often went to a distance of 300 miles, pursued wild animals, offered sacrifice, practiced witchcraft, and prophesied. In this way, numerous places were founded and idolatrous worship established. I saw this woman fall into the sea while struggling with a hippopotamus. Her daughter Semiramis I saw surrounded by all the kingdoms and treasures of the world, as if the devil were showing them to her, giving them to her. I saw that Semiramis put the finishing touch to every abomination of the Babylonian race. In the earliest times, power over others was held more peaceably and was vested in many. Later on, unlimited jurisdiction was possessed by single individuals. These latter then became the leaders, the gods of their followers, and they formulated various systems of idolatrous worship, each according to his own ideas. They could also perform wonders of skill, valor, and invention, for they were full of the spirit of darkness. Thence arose whole tribes, first rulers and priests combined, later of priests alone. I have seen that in those days women of this stamp were more numerous than men. They were all in interior communication, connected with one another by feelings, thoughts, and influence. Many things narrated of them are imperfect recitals of their ecstatic or mesmeric expressions relative to themselves, their origin, their doings, uttered sometimes by themselves, at others by their devilish clairvoyance. The Jews also had many secret arts in Egypt, but Moses, the seer of God, rooted them out. Among the rabbis, however, many such things existed as points of learning. Later on, these secret arts became low, vulgar practices among wandering tribes, and they still exist in witchcraft and superstition. But they have all sprung from the same tree of corruption, from the same low kingdom of darkness. I see the visions of all that engage in such practices either just above or entirely under the earth. There is an element of the same in magnetism. Water was held specially sacred by those early idolaters. It entered into all their service. Whether divinations or ecstasies, they always began by a gazing into water. They had ponds consecrated to that purpose. After some time, their ecstatic state became habitual, and even without the aid of water, they had their evil visions. I have seen the way in which they had those visions, and it was indeed singular. The whole earth with all that it contained seemed to be once more under water, but veiled as in a dark sphere. I saw that those enchantresses beheld all that was going on, wars, nations, perils, etc., just as is done at the present day, only with this difference that the former put what they saw into effect, made good what they saw. Here was a nation to be subdued, here one to be taken by surprise, there a city to be built. Here were famous men and women, and there was the plan by which they might be outwitted. In fine, every item of their diabolical worship was seen before reduced to practice by those females. Derceto saw in vision that she should cast herself into the sea and be transformed into a fish, and what she saw she hesitated not to carry into effect. Even the abominations practiced in their worship were all mirrored in the water before they put them into execution. In the age in which Derceto's daughter lived, dikes and roads began to be constructed. She raided down into Egypt itself. Her whole life was one series of movings and hunting expeditions. Her adherents belonged to the tribe that had plundered Job in Arabia. The diabolical worship of Derceto's people became systematized first in Egypt. Here it took such hold that while the witches sat in the temples and in chambers on strange-looking seats before various kinds of mirrors, their visions, communicated while actually seen, were reported by the priests to hundreds of men who engraved them upon the stone walls of caverns. Strange that I should see all those abominable chief instruments of darkness always in unconscious communion with one another. I saw similar actions and things going on in different places among similar instruments of the evil one. The only difference among them was that which arose from the diversity of manners and customs among the several nations and the different degrees of depravity into which they had fallen. Some had not as yet sunk so deep in these abominations, and were not so far removed from the truth. Those, for instance, from whom the family of Abraham and the races of Job and the 3 kings sprang, as also the star worshippers of Chaldea, and they that had the shining star. When Jesus Christ came upon earth, when the earth was soaked with his blood, the fierce influence of such practices was considerably diminished, and witchcraft lost much of its power. Moses was a seer from his cradle, but he was according to God, and he always practiced what he saw. Derceto, her daughter, and her granddaughter Semiramis lived to be very old, according to the general age of that time. They were tall, powerful, mighty, such as would almost frighten us in our day. They were inconceivably bold, fierce, shameless, and they carried out with astonishing assurance whatever the evil one had shown them in vision. They felt their own power, they thought themselves divinities. It is touching to see how the holy patriarchs, although they had frequent revelations from God, had nevertheless to suffer and to struggle unremittingly in order to keep clear of the abominations that surrounded them. And again, is it affecting to remember in what secret, what painful ways salvation at last came upon earth, while all went well with demonolatry, while all things were made to subserve its interests. When I saw all this, the immense influence exercised by those goddesses and the high worship they received over all the earth, and on the other side, when I contemplated Mary's little band with whose symbolical picture in the cloud of Elias the philosophers of Cyprus sought to couple their lying abominations, when I saw Jesus, the fulfillment of all promises, poor and patient, standing before them, teaching, and afterward going to meet his cross, that made me inexpressibly sad. But after all, this is the history of the truth, and the light ever shining in the darkness, and the darkness not comprehending it. And so it has been, and so it is still, the same old story, even down to our own day. But the mercy of God is infinite. I have seen that at the time of the flood, many, very many, were saved from eternal punishment. Fright and anguish converted them to God. They went to purgatory, and Jesus freed them on his descent into hell. Numbers of trees escaped being uprooted by the waters of the flood. I saw them thriving again, but most of them were covered, choked up by mud.
Well then, that will be all for the video this time. And as always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. And hopefully all of you have learned so much from this video. And remember, if ever you have any feedback or suggestion, please let us know in the comments below. Anyway, if you like what we do and you'd like to support us, I left a link to our PayPal donation in the description box below, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your continuous support, contributions, and prayers. And until the next one, thanks again for watching, and may God bless you.
Sending blessing, which is God's benevolence upon a person. He's condoning and he's blessing what you're doing. So when you say, I bless you, God, you're not adding anything to God, but what you're doing is you are, in a way, it's part of praising him, but also increasing the accidental glory of all things that he made, because they can only increase in and through your praise to him. So when you bless God, that affirmation can assume various facets. It could be one of thanksgiving, one of praise, one of glory, one of gratitude, one of thankfulness, one of acknowledgement, and the list goes on. So blessing God doesn't mean he needs your blessing. He needs to be holy through your blessing. No. It means that you are using a biblical term. That meaning is found in the Bible. You see, we can never apply to our modern English language the words that we take from Scripture. We're taking it from a Hebrew, a Greek language, and it's translated in the 4th century into Latin, and then from Latin it goes into English. So it's been translated 4 times before we even get it. So when we hear the word bless, we're assuming, oh, that means I'm giving God something he doesn't have. We're not. Blessing is simply a thanksgiving, a praise, an acknowledgement, all the above, and rejoicing at the same time. And God loves that when you bless him. So blessing does not in any way imply anything other than glorifying the one who gave you life for the life you have and for all the blessings he's bestowed upon you.